All right, now to our first conversation. Well, forced displacement has reached record highs over the past decade, with developing countries bearing the brunt. Africa currently hosts the highest number of people forced to flee in the world, nearly 36 million people out of the more than 84 million forced to flee due to conflict, violence, persecution, and actually climate change. While humanitarian assistance has effectively supported, misplaced populations in the emergencies, a different approach is needed, involving new actors, predominantly the private sector, in contributing to sustainable solutions for refugees and displaced persons. It's for this reason that the Amahoro Coalition, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, a UN refugee agency, and the African Entrepreneur Collective will convene the inaugural 36 Million Solutions Africa Private Sector Forum on Forced Displacement from 30th of November to 2nd of December 2021 in Kigali, Rwanda. To tell us more about this forum is the founder and president of the Wellbeing Foundation Africa, Mrs. Tonyo Jara-Saraki. We also have Mr. Isaac Kwaku Fokwo, a co-founder of Amahoro Coalition, an African-led initiative convening private sector leaders to advance economic inclusion. Great to have you both on the program. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting us.
Okay, so I'll start with you, Mr. Kwaku. Good morning. Well, forced displacement has reached, record highs over the past decade. Can you talk to us about this inaugural forum, its theme, how it came about, and the significance of this time?
Absolutely, thank you, and good morning again to you and your listeners. Look, I think that the problem you highlighted, I think you rightfully said it. I mean, close to 84 million people globally are displaced. Africa, which represents 16% of the global population, is recipient to 35 or 36 million people, plus or minus. This is a major problem, right? So on our continent, if we're saying that 36 million people of our fellow Africans have been forced to leave their homes, and they are either refugees, internally displaced, stateless, or asylum seekers, that's a problem that we need to address. And so with that in mind, one of the things that, became very clear to us as we're taking on this problem is that we needed to identify ways to open the tent to figure out how we can bring practical solutions to this to this issue. Because as you know, refugees and IDPs and stateless persons are people who have left their homes, not by choice, but because they've been forced to do so. We chose the theme 36 Million Solutions as a collective response to this staggering problem. And also to ensure that, we set an ambitious target of response where every person who is forced to leave their home because of violence, persecution, and conflict on the continent of Africa has the support, resources, and tools necessary to rebuild their lives. So you ask yourself, why does private sector come in? Well, private sector comes in because private sector has a role to play in this conversation. The Africa private sector is increasingly becoming more sophisticated. And as you rightly said in one of the introductory remarks, there's COP26 going on. There's a lot of conversation going around energy and climate change and everything else. And so private sector actors are increasingly becoming custodians and also becoming more responsible for some of the welfare of states in which they live. Furthermore, we believe that if private sector invests in refugees, we're also investing in solutions for local communities, for the host communities in which these forcibly displaced people are finding themselves as new homes, thereby fostering social cohesion by setting up priority programs such as education, livelihoods, and financial inclusion projects that allows for mutually beneficial shared value solutions. So really, the point of this event that we're having in Kigali from 30th November to December 2nd is to build linkages on common values. And intention is to build support for the most vulnerable amongst us and do this through multi-stakeholder solutions in a way that allows everyone to make sure that we're building shared prosperity across the African continent.
All right, Mr. Fokwo, I'll come back to you. Mrs. Saraki, I understand you recently visited Dagom refugee settlement in Ogoja, that's in Cross River State, and you met with, Cameroonian refugees. Can you share with us your experience there?
Absolutely. It gladdened my heart to actually usher in my birthday in September with the refugees of the Adagam resettlement community at Ogoja, Cross River State, where UNHCR has been working very hard, along with the Cross River State government and the NEMA, to actually resettle these refugees permanently. It was an incredible experience. Adagam is a community that is filled with vibrance and resilience as the refugees that have made their home there struggle to create a new life. I saw that COVID-19 has affected that community disproportionately, especially the women and the girls that are there who were in need of maternal and child health support, family support, and timely antenatal care. In fact, on the spot, I immediately started my Wellbeing Foundation Africa's Mama Care, antenatal and postnatal education, as well as our adolescents PSHE WASH. But what I saw from the logistics that it took for me to visit them for my birthday, and I thought I was making a huge contribution, you know, a couple of trailers of food and sort of sanitation and dignity items, but I could see that what I took would probably only last 2 days in a refugee settlement of that size. So it spurred my intention that we have to gather the private sector to act fast, to get these settlement communities back on track, and to ensure that no woman, no expectant mother, no girl child, no boy, no man, no family is left behind. And that's the reason why I've joined hands with UNHCR globally, UNHCR Nigeria, and UNHCR private sector partnerships, which provides a very innovative platform to support such vulnerable communities across the continent and across the world by protecting and empowering displaced men, women, and youth, to promote social and economic inclusion, and to foster very good relationships with their local communities. No one is truly safe until everyone is safe, and I'm pleased to join UNHCR, partnering to ensure that all refugees and displaced persons have access to their basic human rights and dignities, including the right to work.
The right to work. All right, I can imagine how emotional it would be seeing people in such a situation. But let me come to Mr. Fokwo now. You know, we know that humanitarian assistance has, you know, effectively supported displaced populations in emergency. So why do you believe that a broadened approach is needed to, you know, address the forced displacement crisis at this time?
You know, a broadened approach is necessary because, frankly, the gap between the needs and the resources are just too wide, right? I mean, take, for example, our governments. Our governments in Africa have historically welcomed and opened their borders to people fleeing from war, conflict, violence, and persecution. This has happened all through Africa's history. I mean, you just mentioned, Madam Toyin just mentioned about being in a place in Nigeria to see Cameroon refugees. Governments have been hosting refugees in Africa a very, very long time, and we also can understand that our governments have very, very limited resources. And in Africa, you know, the collection of revenue for government to do a lot of things, including infrastructure and everything else, is quite tight. But the governments do what they can do. And then you take humanitarian organizations such as the UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, that relies almost entirely on voluntary contributions, right? The UN gets its money from people like you and I, from governments who volunteer to give money to the organization to implementing partners on the ground to do their work. And they're stretched, and they do a fantastic job doing that. They offer emergency relief, they offer support, and they do whatever they can to make sure that people have decent places to stay, decent places to live, have a form of education, and do this very well. So, but it's not enough, like I said, you know, because the gap is widening. Take, for instance, Nigeria as a country. Nigeria is the largest country in Africa and also the largest economy in the continent of Africa. Currently, Nigeria has over 3 million internally displaced people and another 75,000 plus refugees and asylum seekers. And many of these individuals have been in this situation, not for months, but for years. So imagine years and years of being in a situation where you have 3 million people who are internally displaced, another 75,000 that are refugees and asylum seekers. Obviously, the resources that need to go to other population is quite tremendous. At the same time, Nigeria also proudly happens to host some of the most vibrant and successful businesses and entrepreneurs and companies on the African continent that are very committed to social responsibility, impact investing, ESGs, and shared value goals. So our conversation is saying, look, let's broaden the net. Let's have this forum to unite these businesses with industry leaders alongside multi-stakeholder partners from Nigeria and other parts of the continent to accelerate private sector's leadership in this conversation to drive sustainable market-based interventions, because that's the only way, by having a multi-stakeholder approach, by making sure that we have governments on board with businesses, with civil society and other actors. That's the only way that we can address this conversation in a much meaningful manner to close the gap between the resources and the needs that are necessary to do so.
I guess everyone has a collective part to play in all of this. But Mrs. Saraki, what role will the private sector play in helping to, you know, rebuild the lives, you know, of people that were forced to, you know, flee at the different situations there?
Absolutely. Africa's private sector is well positioned as a critical agent of productivity, prosperity, and change. The private sector can invest in refugee hosting communities as partners, donors, or employers. The private sector, made of national, multinational companies, foundations, and individuals, can increase their step into the humanitarian relief space to support innovative responses to the urgent and critical needs of the vulnerable communities. The private sector has always been at the forefront of creating solutions that lift thousands of marginalized and underserved communities out of abject poverty. Often forcibly displaced people who do represent the most vulnerable communities on our continent are overlooked. And because of that, they don't fully benefit from the innovative solutions and social investment programs that are spearheaded already by the private sector in Africa. We are facing the highest levels of forced displacement in history and in the world. And this multi-stakeholder approach that Isaac has mentioned is critically needed now. You know, we can thrive through innovative shared value partnerships. We can rebuild the lives of the people who were forced to flee by harnessing their capacity and turning their displacement challenges into development opportunities. In recent years, we've entered the era of increased social responsibility and awareness, and that transition involved new business practices and business partnership models, which meant that this particular topic, generating revenues while contributing to tackling displacement challenges, is a challenge that we need to take now. The needs that have been created from the large flows of displaced populations into a host country can also bring opportunities. So I'm hoping that the private sector will brace up to identify these opportunities, open up markets, upgrade infrastructure, create jobs and income for the displaced population, giving them a sense of significance, self-reliance, and belonging. You know, in as much as we promote the principle of non-refoulement, helping refugees to contribute to the local economies of the host communities will allow them either to become full parts of those host communities and play their part, or should the reasons why they were forced to flee improve in their host countries, put them in a better economic position to choose to return if that is their choice. So we need to make use of the market systems that offer greater access to products and services that will improve both the quality of life of the displaced the populations, and even that of the host communities. We have seen, for instance, improvement in wash facilities in the displaced community resettlement camps also improve those of host communities. Particularly, I'd like to put the focus on women. Helping women will help to sustain the dignity of families and people that are already in a fragile situation. I would love to see training, apprenticeships, on-the-job training to displaced persons to upgrade their skills so that they are competent in a given job and at their current location. I believe that if we intentionally, through the private sector, begin to plan around our refugee and displaced communities, we will have a greater pool of human resources to contribute to our own local economies.
All right, Mrs. Sarki. Well, Mr. Kwakuyo, the event kicks off from the 30th, but who should attend the Africa Private Sector Forum, you know, on forced displacement, and what can they expect to actually get out of this forum?
Yeah, we welcome anyone and everyone who is interested in this conversation in the ecosystem we're talking about, which is initially private sector. So business industry leaders, thought leaders, foundations, philanthropists from Africa are welcome to the table to have these conversations to help us commit mechanisms to support the forced displaced in African continent. And what can they expect to get out of the event? A couple of things. I think, first of all, they can expect an intimate gathering that is quite unique in creating a network effect for them to influence decisions in this conversation, in this space. I think, secondly, there's an opportunity to connect with policymakers, business leaders, and thought leaders to shape the future of Africa philanthropy. You know, as I say sometimes, you know, Africa has we have amazing people who give a lot of charity, and we have a lot of people who also are very, very philanthropic. But we do need to widen the number of philanthropists that we have on the continent. And I think this conversation that we're going to have at the end of the month presents an opportunity to do so. Also, I'd say that people can appreciate that when they come to the event, they're going to learn how to build resilient business models to help transform refugee and IDP host areas to thriving markets. The space you're talking about, just to give an example, the IFC did a study in Kenya a couple of years ago, looking at Kakuma, one of the refugee camps in Kenya. And one of the things that they came out with is that if Kakuma and the surrounding host community was a county in Kenya, it would be the 11th largest county in Kenya, which has, I believe, 47 counties. So these areas present significant opportunity for market-based ideas that the private sector, in collaboration with other stakeholders, can actually create environments to thrive. And also, I think another thing to expect is that folks will connect with organizations with common goal of alleviating displaced crisis on the African continent.
All right, Mrs. Saraki, I'd like to get your final thoughts here. We know that people, getting displaced all over the world is a big problem, and actually solving this problem takes a lot of effort. I'd like to get your final thoughts before I let you go.
Well, what I would say is that with 3 million refugees across Nigeria and with over 75,000 new refugees and displaced persons just in the last month, I would hope that the private sector from Nigeria and across Africa, as we go into Kigali for this conference, will actually consider the creation of economic zones with preferential trade access for refugee-made goods, where domestic as well as foreign investors can relocate supply chains. I'm hoping that out of this conference, the private sector will better understand the long-term needs of displaced persons and host communities as potential consumers and clients, so that we are well prepared for the risks. I'm looking forward to the synergy and leverages, such as public-private partnerships.
All right. I'd like to thank you both for coming on the program. Mrs. Tony Saraki, founder, Wellbeing Foundation Africa, and Mr. Isaac Kwaku, co-founder, Amahoro Coalition. Thank you both for coming on the program.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.